Well, welcome back, everyone. And we're going to dive into the hands-on for our Rekenreks. So I'm going to just switch to my Rekenrek, and I'm going to use a 10-bar Rekenrek, only because it's a little bit easier for you to see. I'll just adjust it a bit so we can move up one. But we're only going to assume that you have a 2-bar Rekenrek. So to start with, especially just for the very small ones and the original Rekenreks, they're all based on a 2-row Rekenrek. So we'd be assuming that these are the 2 rows that you've built. Okay, and again, I'll go through that at the end of the video, just the quick supplies that we talked about on the other overview. So when I first start with Rekenreks, I would suggest maybe just giving children an opportunity just to give you some feedback. Remember that they come in double colors, either white, red. They don't have to be white, red. Those are just the typical ones, but they could be any two different colors. Typically, they have the red first and then the white, but this one's the other way around, and it really doesn't matter as long as it's consistent. And even in some cases, you will see that a 10-bar will have the first 5 in this order, and then the second order, they'll switch them. And go red and white instead, so that it's obvious to see here's your first 50 and here's your second 50. Okay, so let's just assume that you're working with a small Rekenrek, a 2-row Rekenrek. And so we're going to start right in here. And I would just ask students, and I would just look at the first row. I wouldn't even worry about 2 rows. Okay, we'll just work on 1 to start with, because really in kindergarten and grade 1, when they're just learning, or anybody who has never worked with it before, you're just going to start from the basics. So we might just say to them, you know, what do we notice about our row? What are we seeing here? And they're going to say things like, well, I see 2 colors. If they know anything about counting, they might say, I see 5 whites, or I see 5 reds. All good. That's correct. And one of the things that we know is that these can move. So we'd have them play with them, that they can just take them and move them with their fingers, and that they could do that kind of work. So you just let them play with that for a bit. What we try to do is set some ground rules with them right off the bat. So we always say that when we are working with our Rekenreks, home base or home place is always everything pushed to the right. So the right side of our rod or our paper is home base. And anytime we do something, we call it a push. So we're looking for, can you push 2? Can you push 1 more? Can you push 2 more? So it's always not take 1 bead and move it. We use the word push. And what we're trying to get at is for students not to be counting 1, 2, 3, push 3. Okay, they will initially do that anyway. But what we're looking for is, can they subitize that quick 3 number, and can they push that value? And they do get very good at that right from kindergarten up. They just need practice. You just need to give them opportunities and to say to them, you know, I would really like you to stop at some point going 1, 2, 3. Can you see that this is 3? And if you already know that that's 3, can you push 3 for me? And so letting them use that language of push, that's really, really important. So the first thing we're going to do is, let's just practice. I'm going to ask you to push 1. So they're going to take their fingers and push 1. And we're going to say, now let's remind ourselves, we always want to do something. We're going to move it back home again. So this time I want you to push 2. So push 2, even if they went 1, 2. And then we're going to remind ourselves it has to go back home again. So this time I'm going to say, can you push 3? And they've probably seen a pattern. And now I'm going to ask them to remember what we need to do before we do something else. And hopefully they're going to say it's got to go home again. Good. All right. So it's going to go home again. So now we might want to say, let's push 5. So they might count 1, 2, 3. And I push all of that 1 color, in this case, white. So now I might ask them, what did you notice about 5s when you pushed the 5? Well, how was that different when we pushed 1 or 2? And they will give you lots of different conversations, but one of them will probably be that we used all of the whites. And then we can have that conversation. That's right. There are 5 whites and there are 5 reds in our row. So each group has 5. And remember, in kindergarten, subitizing to 5 is part of their curriculum. quickly subitizing to 10 is part of grade 1 and beyond. If they can go beyond is even better. But that helps us to get to that point, because now I can see as a kindergarten student, I can subitize 2 different groups of 5. I've got a group of white 5 and a group of red 5. So again, this is just moving towards those pieces that we want them to be able to do. So now let's keep moving. And remember, with these videos, we can't spend a whole day on doing what we're going to do. We're just going to kind of move forward. So once I've pushed 5, I might say to them, can you push 6 for me? And so they will either count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or some will go that 5 and 1 more is 6. So now we're getting into those set groups that we know, 5s, 10s, 2 more, doubles plus. So instead of just starting and counting from 1, I would be counting on from 5 to 6. So this is another way that I can practice that count on system. So we put it back again. So if we say to them that the white plus 1 bead is 6, what do you think 7 would look like? Can you push 7? So if they know that 5, 6, 7, 2 more, they would grab it and push it. So this is really important for them to practice. And even if they have it a small 2-row in their desk, and they come in every morning and you just say, okay, we're going to do a quick practice. I'm going to call out some numbers. I want you to push them. And just within the realm of whatever number system you're working on, so that they get practice at quickly grabbing. Let's practice. Let's push a 2. Okay, let's push a 2. Let's push it. Let's put it back. Let's push a 4. Okay, so that they're starting to really get good at that. And they really do like the hands-on piece. So that's really important for them. What if I said push 9? So some students will go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they'll push, push their 9. On the wrong row there. Or some, and I'll ask them, how did you get to 9? So maybe, 5, I counted on 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so you counted on from 5. And how many more did you have? 4. We're not getting into the verbal addition yet, but really that's what they're doing, right? Some students will say, well, I knew that there were 10 in a row and that 9 is 1 less. So I just needed to grab 1 less than the whole row. Excellent, right? That's that kind of thinking that we want. So again, students who are struggling with just the notion of numbers and addition, or numbers and recognizing them, will benefit from having a Rekenreks in front of them, because they can do those simple pieces. There are some suggestions about, and there's no one perfect one, but I did grab one set. White has always got a bit of a glare to it, so this is a possible order that you can practice with them. So I just thought I'll throw it down, and maybe you want to just write it down as well. But if I always want to do some quick practicing with the students, you'll notice that how the numbering is going. I'm starting with 1, then I'm basically adding 1 right beside it to 2. Then I'm going to a group of 5. Then I'm going to 1 less than the whole row, going to the whole row. Then I'm going to 2 less in the row. Then I'm going to a group of 5 plus 1, a group of 5 plus 2, and then the 3. So I could do that easily and practice that and practice that and practice that for kindergarten students. I could also practice that for grade 1s who are just getting started on a Rekenreks and are just mastering the 10 row. But then you see below that would be a good one for the grade 1s to go to. What if I said to go to 11? So now I'm going to be using 2 rows, right? The 11 says I have a full row and then a 1. The 12 is a full row and a 2. The 15, a full row and a full group of 5 colored. Then a double, so both rows, etc. Right? You get the idea. So it's just the same numbers in grade as they had in grade 1 to practice, but they're really just going through and adding a 10 base to it as well. Okay. Now we'll just stay in the 1 row just for a bit here yet. So I might even say, all right, on the row that you have, can you show me a push that is less than 5? So what am I asking them? I'm asking them to know that this is 5, and I want them to push me anything that's less than 5. So obviously they could push 4, 3, 2, 1. Any one of those would be correct. So again, we're just doing some comparative language. Do they understand their quantity? 5 or less. So in this case, I want 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay, back to the home base again. Can you show me a number that is less than 3? So now I want them to be able to subbutize to 3 quickly. And I know that that is 3, so smaller than 3 could be 1 or 2, right? So they have a limited amount. So you could call out all different kinds of things. And again, depending on where your students are at, I could say, could you show me a number that is larger than 5? So that means I know that this is 5. So anything that's beyond that, I can count, I can just push. So there I'm showing you 8. So again, it's just wherever they're at, back and forth, both sides of, let's say 5, using 5 as your marker. I want to be able to go to both sides of those. And then again, you're just building on the subbutizing aspect of it and the quick counts to it. You're not inadvertently, you're actually doing addition with them, the counting on part, but we're not naming that yet. That's going to come later on. So can I get to 7 by counting on in my head 5 plus 2? And then I know that I have to push those amounts to give me 7. Okay, so now we're going to ask them, can you look at the second row? So they're going to look at the next row that they built. Most of you, when you're building these Rekenreks, if you're doing them with a kindergarten grade 1, you might just want to do 2 rows, but a lot of teachers do more than that. They'll do 5. It's really hard to do 10 on a piece of paper, but you can do 5, and we'll look at that at the end as well. So what do I notice about my second row? Well, my second row, they'll say, well, it looks exactly the same as the first row. I'm going to say, is it exactly the same? Are there the same number of whites? Yes. Can you show me? Well, yeah, I can push them and I can see that they line up. So, and that's an important visual for them to see. Yeah, they line up. So they are the same number, and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have 5 there and 5 here. Okay, where I'm going to start working to is towards doubles. So what do I notice about the reds? Well, the reds are the same. I have 5 reds and I have 5 reds here. They end in the same length, so they must be the same amount. So there's 5. And together we know that, again, I get 5 and 5 is 10 there. I have 5 and 5 is 10 here. So now I can go 5, 10, 15, 20. Or I can say, how many whites do you have? 5, 10. Or how else can you say it? 5 plus 5, right? It depends on where they are in the curriculum and what you're doing with them. So now I have the potential of doing numbers that are larger than 10. I'm going to do math that's going to go up to 20. I can also do skip counting. So those are other pieces that all can get introduced into my double rows now. And the more rows I have, obviously, the more I'm going to be able to do. So if I said, can you skip count by 2s to 10? Well, I can push by 2s. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Right, and so we can now go back to home base. Can you use both rows and see if you can count by 2s? So again, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So there's my first row. 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. And they can show that to us. And then they also have to be able to count backwards from 20 by 1. So then they can say, if this is number 20, let's go backwards. So 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11. So there's that row back. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So there's my full row. And I know I must be right because I used exactly the correct amount. So I'm able to do that. And you're looking at larger rows here. I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit so I can see that once I start to really understand how the Rekenrek works, if I have a 10 row in front of me, I have leverage there to do lots of skip counting with them. So again, here's my 5, 10, 15, 20. You're not seeing all my rows, but 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on, right? So I'm going to go down all the whites, and because I have 10 rows of them, there's 50. And I'm going to do all the reds because there's 10 rows of 5, there's another 50. So 50 and 50 is 100. So again, they're seeing 100 in all different ways. They're seeing it in groups of 10. They're seeing it in groups of 5. I can skip count by 5s. I could skip count by 2s all the way through if I wanted to go all the way for 100. If all I know how to count to is 30 yet, then maybe I'm only going to be asked to do the first 3 rows, etc. So you can differentiate this very, very quickly based on the ability of the students and where they're at for each group. Okay, so now let's get into maybe a little bit of a part whole counting on kind of conversation. Okay, I'm going to I'm going to call out a number. So you can call this a team approach or whatever you want. So you're going to say, you have your 2-row Rekenreks. I'm going to call out a number that I'm going to push on my top row, and I want you to push that same number. So I'm going to say our magic number is 2, and I'm going to push a 1. What number will you have to push on the bottom row? So there's the team game to make sure that we get to 2. So 1 plus 1, or 1 and 1 is 2. So I call out the top row number. I call out the number, the total, and then I tell them what I'm going to push on my row. They have to figure out what would they need to count onto or add to that to get that number. Let's try another one. Our magic number is 4, and I'm going to push 2. What are you going to push to make up the rest of our 4? I gave you 2. What are you going to push? So they might go 3, 4. Okay. Yep. Hopefully at some point we're not going to hear 3, 4. We're just going to hear that I need 2 and 2. Right. So you can do that again, all different kinds of numbers. Our magic number is 7. I'm going to push 4. What are you going to push to get to our magic number of 7? So all of them will be moving their own, and most of them will match whatever you're doing on the top row so that they can see the 7. Okay, so then we're going to move into, we will do all kinds of numbers like that, right? And with grade 1s, go bigger for sure. But now I'm going to say, I'd like you to push a 2 on each of your rows, because we're going to use both of their rows. So I'm going to push a 2, and I'm going to push a 2 on each of my rows. And so what we say is, what do you see? Well, I see the same thing on both rows. Yep. How do you know? Again, well, I could measure. They're both ending in the same place. How many do we have in total? We have 4. So there's my double 2. So I could start again with a 1, right? I could say, let's push them back to home base. If you pushed a 1 on each row, how many beads do we have? We have 2. We have the same amount on each one. I can put my pencil or my finger there. So now I could say, can you push 4 on each row? So 4 on each row. Again, how many do we have? We have 8. So we're wanting them to see all the doubles. So you could go in a mixed order. You could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Because then I can see the color differences. And then I can get into the 5 and 1. How did I get to 6s? I went 5 and 1. What do I see? 2 groups of 6s. What's 6 plus 6? 12. So 2 6s are 12. So again, this is another way for me to be able to get at doubles. But then we also, as you're practicing all of those doubles, and we can do the 10 and 10 is 20 and so on. But what I also want for them to be able to utilize those doubles for is when we teach them doubles, let's just stick with the 5s for a minute. We say, what is the total that we see here? How could I figure that out quickly? What do I know? I know that 2 double 5s are 10. And if I add 1 to 10, I get 11. So you're using the notion of the doubles plus 1, doubles plus 2, doubles take away 1. So for example, if it had looked like this, there's 2 ways of looking at that. It's like saying that I had 2 5s, which are 10, but I got 1 away, so I have 9. Or you go back to, I have 2 4s, which is 8, and 1 more is 9. So they should be able to see both of those and practice both of those. One will make more sense to them than the other, and they'll gravitate towards that a lot. But this is the kind of thing that a Rekenreks lets you do, and it lets you do it quickly. Okay, those are important pieces for the students to see and practice. You're not doing this all in one day. This is over time. But they catch on to these beads very, very quickly. So again, we just want to work on those. Now, let's take one more. Let's say I asked you to push a 9. So they're going to push a 9. And now my question is, how many more would you push on your next row to get to 12? So how many more would you push on your next row to get to 12? So they might go 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so I have to push 3. Some kids will, some students will already know that. So I have 9 in this row and 3 in this row. I can count them and I end up with 12. But one of the strengths of the Rekenreks is that it works on 10s, and 10s are easy for students to add to. So if I were to keep that in the back of my mind, if we say to the students, so you had 12, what if we just wanted to fill a row before we use the next row? What could I do? Well, I could bring my red one up that I didn't use, but then I have to put one back, right? Because that was an extra. So now I have a whole row of 10 plus 2 is 12. And that's in sort of the most efficient way of using the Rekenreks, where we'd like them to get to at some point. Initially, you can call out two numbers, have them show those two numbers, and then they go back and regroup to fill a row, because 10, 10, 10, those are easy to work with. Okay, let's try another one. What if I asked you to show me 8 in the first row and 7 in the second row? And again, we say to them, we'd like you to fill the row first before we start to figure out what we have. Now we could say, how many do we have? Well, I have 5, 10. I have a group of 3 and a group of 2. That's the same as another 5, so there's 15. Okay, so let's fill our whole row first. So if I move these 2 up, I need to move those 2 back. And now I get a really good visual of the 15. So it's that trading, that converting, just like we do in base 10 blocks, only this is a little different converting because you're just trading it for 10s all the time. Okay, all right, so let's take a leap forward. And let's say that I would like them to show me an 11. So that means that they understand that a group in the row is 10. I have one more, that's 11. Right? Same thing with the base 10, working with a full 10 and then adding a number to it. So now I can ask them to make teen numbers. So can you show me 16? So 16 is 10 and a number. That's what we do in grade 1. So 16 is 10 and 6 more. And we know that a group of 5 with 1 more is a 6. So that's the kind of thinking. And just for them to do it maybe isn't enough for you to make sure they understand why they're doing what they're doing. So when you're walking around the classroom, asking them, why did you move this 1 on the end? Like, how did you know that that was 16? And get them to explain to you, not that, and if every time you come around, they say, because I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, then they still have not yet really subitized and not really grouping the numbers. They're not really understanding even counting on, right? They're going back to starting by ones every time. So that conservation of number, I know that there's 5 here. If I add 1 more, I get 6. I don't have to go back and recount it all the time. So that's the kind of question you want to ask them for understanding and clarity, that formative assessment piece, to make sure that in fact they're where they're supposed to be. Okay, so then maybe I'm going to go to, let's say if I said to them, show me 16 again. So they show me 16. And I say to them, I would like to take away 2. Now, we have a row of 10, so we're always going to work from the row that doesn't have a full row. I have 16 and I want to take away 2. I want to know how many would be left over. So I can count backwards, 16, 15, go back, and that leaves me with 10 and 4 or 14. So you're seeing where I'm going again. It's that addition, subtraction, basic math facts. I can go back and forth and I'm just subtracting or I'm adding, I'm composing, recomposing to get 10. And sometimes I may have to come up here. Let's say if I had said now I have 14 and I want you to take away 5. Well, I can take these 4 away, but I don't have 5 yet. I need 1 more taken away. So now I have 5 and 4 is 9. So it's building up and building back that notion of groupings of 10, leveraging the 2 sets of 5. And this is what some students gravitate to so quickly, because that is very visual for them. It's an easy way for them to almost do like a calculator, right? It's the same idea. Okay, so let's go into, we've done some of the skip counting already. So if I was doing all 10s, I could skip count by 10s, I could skip count by 5s. That will get me to the 100. That's all part of the grade 1 curriculum right now, skip counting by 2s, counting forwards and backwards. Those are the other ways that I could do it. So now let's go into some double-digit numbers that we might have that we want to work towards. So let's say that I want them to solve, so I'm moving into grade 2 already, 22. So I'm going to ask them to, first of all, show me double-digit numbers. Can you show me 22? Well, I know that 22 is made up of a 10 and a 10. If we need to show them that on a board, what makes a 20? 10, 20, and I need 2. So there's my 22, right? So now if I said to them, you have 22, and I would like you on the next row to add 6. So show me another 6. So 5 and 1 is 6. So there's my group of 6. How many do we have all together? Well, there's lots of things they're going to see. They're going to see 5, 10, 15, 20, or they're going to see 2 groups of 10 and a 5, full 5 down here is 15, 16, 17, 18. So I have 28. Or remember we said we like to fill rows. So I have 2 here. I have 6 down here. Do I have enough to build 6 from here? I do. I have 6 is 3 and 3. So 3 and 3 moved over here means I could move those back. So 22 plus 8 is, or sorry, 22 plus 6 is 28. So now I can do double-digit, single-digit addition. I can do double-digit addition. Let's do another double with a single. Okay, so push everything back, and hope you're doing these with me as we go along. So let's do 33. So show me 33 first. So 10, 20, 30, and 3. And now from my full row, I would like you to show me an 8. So we know that 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's my 8. So now my question is, do we have 8 that we can grab from here? No, we have 5 and 2 is 7. So I can take these 7 and move them over to fill my row and move 7 back, 1 less than 8. So I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 1. 33 plus 8 is 41. Pretty slick, really, right? Kids get really good at this. They like the slide, but they also find it quite easy to connect with. And if we can do this kind of math with them first, before we start launching into the symbolics, at some point as we're starting to do this and they're getting really fast at it, for sure we should have paper and pencil. We should have that question 38 plus 8 on it. And we'll have it written down. That will be their prompt as to what they're going to move. And then they can do regrouping and then they can write their answer down. So this is kind of how we transition from just the Rekenreks to doing both at the same time. But there is no rush to go straight to just the numbers on a piece of paper, right? That's not it at all. So let's try a double digit with a double digit because then you'll get the idea. So let's do 32. So show me 32. 10, 20, 30, and 2. And then from there, I'd like you to show me 24. Well, 24, that's 2 full rows, 10, 20, and 4. So anything that's a full row, I'm going to try and leave those alone for now. And up here I have 2, and down here I have 4. So let's say I want to move these 4 up here. I'll check. Do I have 4? I sure do. I can take the 3 and a red. I'll put these back. And so my answer is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 5 plus 1 is 6. Again, pretty easy for the kids to maneuver, and they get really good at it, and they're really fast at it. All right, let's move those back. And one of the things that I'm just going to show you, we won't do a whole bunch more of these, but I just want to show you that lots of you have flashcards in your classrooms. So I could hold a flashcard up, and that becomes the question that they're going to fix, or they're going to just show me on their Rekenreks. Okay. And if they have larger ones, or if you've got double sides to them, again, you can turn them over and you can give them a new question. If you've got some really tough, some kids that are ready for some higher ones, and you would get some higher order question cards. If I'm just working at sort of grade 1 level, where I'm doing basic facts to 20, I might be using those. So it's an endless amount, or you can get some blank cards. And if you have some high flyers, and you might want to write some of those out for them specifically for them, and even maybe over a number that they haven't yet done. So they have to think it through a little bit. 12 and 11. Here's where I'm going to use multiple rows. Simple fact question. And eventually we want them to be able to do that symbolically, and we're using a traditional algorithm going through that process. But until I actually understand what it is I'm doing, then this wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. These would make total sense to do this with money at the same time. Having a $10 bill for each row of Rekenreks, each one of those bills is a loonie. And so as I'm adding the loonies or the beads together, when I convert to a row, when I build a row, I'm building a $10 bill because I traded 10 loonies for a $10 bill. So all of that links together, and that's where money becomes your manipulative, not just the concept. Okay, let me throw a what if at you. So what if, and you can't see my top row right now because well, I can move it down, doesn't matter. There's just bars in there. I didn't want to get those in the way. So you won't see all of my 10 rows, but here's my top row on my Rekenrek. What if I said to you, every bead in the top row was worth 10? So I'm going to change the rules just for the top row. The top row is 10. So what does that mean? Well, if I go and count them, it would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. So now this row is a hundreds row. And so I could say to you, could you show me what 124 looks like? Well, the only row that has 100 in it is there. So there's 100, 10, 20. Okay, so I can change the rules. I'm not stuck to just making these ones. I can change the rules, but I'm not going to just drop that on a student until they're ready to drop that, right? So that means that when I do that, the value of this row is 100, whereas the value of this row was 10. Okay, what if I said to you, every bead on your Rekenrek was worth 10? So now, remember we just did this. This one gave me 100. Well, since I have 10 rows, each row is 100. I have 10 rows of 100. My Rekenrek now shows the student 1,000. So if each row is 100, I have a different visual for them to see. Okay, so each one of these is 10. That makes this row 50. And they have to skip counting grade 2s by 50s. So now I could go 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300. So again, I have different ways that I can do this. I have to be able to skip count in hundreds. 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. What if I went every 2? 200, 400, 600, 800, and so on. So you can change the rules of your Rekenrek, but you're certainly not going to just jump on that right off the bat. So you kind of know where I'm going to go with this next. What if every bead was 100? Right? 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000. So in grade 3, they have to investigate 100,000. Right? Well, I'm not there yet. If every one of these was 100, every bead was 100, I have 10 rows of 1,000. So now my Rekenrek is worth 10,000. So I can see how I bridge from 1,000 to 10,000. If I wanted to talk place values with students, we see that incremental factor of 10. So again, I think you probably know what I'm going to say now. What if every bead was worth 1,000? So 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000. So 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, etc. Where you're going to end up is 100,000. So when we investigate, there was no intent in grade 3 for them to add digits all the way to 100,000. That was never part of it. It said investigate. So this is how I can investigate and see what kinds of things happen when these beads change their values, and how good am I at counting and skip counting in increments of 10. So when the beads change their value, that makes a huge, huge difference. So I hope that makes sense to you, because that gives you some other possibilities. The other thing that comes into play here is when I look at these numbers, and I'm just going to divide my reds and my whites for a minute. I also have the potential to use this for my math facts for multiplication. You can use them for division too, but let's just start with 1 first, okay? So just, yeah, I see the skip counts by 5s. I see that. I know that a double 5 is 10. I can go 5 times 5 is 5 plus 5 is 10, plus another 5 is 15. Or 3 groups of 5, here's my array, is 15. Or 4 groups of 5 are 20, and so on. So now I have the potential of using these groups of that I can visually see to create my math facts. So if I wanted to work on the 2s, then I'm just going to work on the 2s, right? Everything will be 2s. And I can add more into the mix as I go. But 2 groups of 2 is 4, or 2 plus 2 is 4. 3 groups of 2 is 6, or 2, 4, 6, etc. Right? So now this isn't just a Rekenreks for counting. Now we tool this up into grade 3, and we say, okay, let's use this to learn our math facts. This could be pennies, and we could send the arrays into pennies. So now I have 100 pennies on my, this is a loonie. They're all 100 pennies. And I can use money at the same time to convert into arrays and create my math facts that way as well. So when I talk about partial products, even when you get into that conversation in grade 3s, the partial product. So if this was 5 times 10, I would be looking at 50 in total, which is the same as 2 times 10, which is 20, plus 3 times 10, which is 30. So you're seeing those partial products, how I can break things up into things I know and add them together. So again, this is not a Rekenreks just for a primary. This definitely moves into multiplication. It then also goes into, I could even say, I have, I'll just do a quick one here. I'm showing 40. I'm just back up my regular ones. I'm showing 40. And when 40 is divided by 5s, how many groups of 5s do I see? So here's 40. How many groups of 5? 1, 2, 3, 4 reds. 1, 2, 3, 4 whites, 8. 40 divided by 8 or 5 is 8. And again, if I wanted to do it with 40 into groups of 8s, I could see that, how that's going to go, right? I can reorganize these. So this is not, and this is where I guess I want to just finish up today, is Rekenreks are not just about adding and just simply adding to 100. They're about incrementing it at whatever level you need, and then also recognizing the pattern that comes into play here. And the pattern also helps me to establish my arrays, my math facts that I want to work on with the students, because in the end, I have 10 rows that I can work to 100, and that's where your goal is for grade 3, math facts to 100. Grade 4, it's 12 by 12. When we look at an abacus, and that's one of the things I'll finish with, is some people say, what's the difference between an abacus then and this? The abacus is the one that has all the different colored beads on it. And I am going to do a session on that too. If you haven't already seen it, you might want to go to that. So the abacus allows me to look at different place values of numbers. That's how it differs. So it's not going to be as long a video, but it helps me to understand this first, how these work. And then when I go to an abacus, I can ask them to show me 1,475,654. That I can do there better than I can here, because the color-coded rows each have their own meaning. So I would have an abacus in a room, I'm not sure that every student has to have one. In pairs would be great if you have one, but you can also do them visually on a laptop. That would be one that I would say maybe not buy, but understand how it works. That would be the key piece. So we'll talk about that later, but this is one of those pieces that is foundational for students' understanding of numeracy. And it's beyond just writing down and counting on my fingers. This gives me the opportunity to be manipulative, to move things around as much as I want. Okay, I promised you I would just show you kind of the things that we do. These are not expensive to buy, and I've shown you those on the overview video, but you can make for a class of, 30, it would cost you very little to make a Rekenreks. So if you go to Dollarama, for example, they have cardstock already cut up. This is the larger size that they have, 21.5 by 14.5. But I'm going to give you a few tips after doing this for a couple of years already. There are some things that I always look back and say, well, it would have been nicer if I could have done this differently. This is just regular cardstock. It's not the most sturdy cardstock. Even Manila tag is a little bit thicker than this, and that would even be better. But if you really want to invest in it and have it for a long time, I would buy cardstock, let's say from Staples, or get the school to buy one package, but get 90 pound. 65 pound is stiff, but not very stiff. It's still kind of like this. It's not a whole lot different. And the reason I say that is because although it's good, when you see the one that I made, it'll move, it'll bend a bit. If you get the 90 pound, and I'll just write it on here, the 90 pound is really kind of, is stiff. Like it's still flexible, but it's stiff. It's thick, and it's less likely to bend with a pipe cleaner in it. Okay, so whatever you end up going, you can even do it with just plain ordinary paper. It just moves a bit more, that's all. All right, so what I normally do depends on how many holes you want. If I'm going to make them in a class, I find that if it's going to be grade 1 and up, then I would, and it's the first time and you're just going to use it for the basic counting, where you can, go to 5. Go to 2 is a minimum. 2 should be the minimum, even with kindergarten. Make 2, because you'll have some high flyers in kindergarten that can count to 20. So let them have that opportunity. And then all I do is I usually just draw a line down the center. This is my master that I use. I just drew a line down the center. I moved mine 2.5 centimeters apart, or an inch for those of you teaching the new grade 3 curriculum. And then I just plot my holes. I just marked it with my pen, hole punch them. And then I use this as my template, so I can put 2 or 3 underneath, and then I punch the holes in. It saves time if you do that for the kids rather than they do that, just because it takes them a while to get the hole punch in their hand and all those types of things, right? So punching the holes is something that I suggest you do just for expediency. Making the Rekenreks, kindergarten up, do their own. Like, they got to learn to count it anyway. So even if in kindergarten I only know how to count to 5, and maybe that's where we start, we just put 5 beads on our pipe cleaner, then that's all we're going to do. So I need some paper. I need one for each student. You're going to need a pipe cleaner for each row that you want to build. And you can buy these at Dollar Tree, Dollarama. They come in packs of 50. Some come in packs of 100. The color doesn't matter, but I find that if you put at least the same color on each student's Rekenreks, then it's less distracting for them. So if I started with yellow on here, I try and do 5 rows of yellow. If the other student says, I want black or I want blue, then we try and accommodate that to have them create a common row. Okay, so I'm going to take this away. The pony beads are available in a lot of different places. It's the barrel pony beads that fit really well on top of the pipe cleaners. These come from Dollar Tree, and they're the ones who seem to carry this brand the most. Right now, at the filming of this, there's a shortage on reds. I'm not sure what that's all about. It has to do, I think, with COVID, and that these come from China, so our supplies are low. So red is a difficult color to get. And although a lot of the Rekenreks that you buy are done in red and white, there is no hard and fast rule that says they have to be red and white. They can be any 2 colors. I've had students do them in black and yellow, blue and green, blue and white, red and blue, like whatever. Just find 2 colors that you would have enough of. And they come in different size packages. This package you're looking at right now that I bought has 175 beads in each package. So if you're only giving each child 10, you get a lot of beads there, right? It's not like this is going to cost a ton of money. So that's why I say to outfit a group of students or a class of 30 this is probably the least costly venture that we have to make a manipulative for a student out of all the things that we have. So you have all of these different beads in here. And again, color doesn't matter. And so really what you're doing is here's a one that we built with the students. So it was only 2. You take your pipe cleaner and you decide what order they're going to go. Is it going to go dark first? I'm not sure if I can get that to focus better. I'll try. There we go. So you decide as the teacher if you want them to have dark first or light first. And it doesn't matter. Just be consistent so that when you're all talking about the dark colors or the light colors, and we're all in the same order. And the nice part of it is if they put their beads on backwards, you just take the pipe cleaner and turn it around and it's not going to be a big deal, right? Can't really screw this up. It's not possible. So once they've got them on their pipe cleaner, they take the pipe cleaner and put the edge through the hole, and then they just fold it back. Okay, and I apologize that that's just not liking because it's got different levels. That's probably why it's not wanting to focus. But you put it through the pipe cleaner or through the hole and then just bend it over. I take a piece of tape and put the tape on the end as well, just because I find it holds it in place. And then the kids keep these in their desk and they don't have to, or in their cubby holes or wherever you have them put their materials, that would be fine. Just a couple of other things to show you. I also created a set of, I just took a shoelace, just a leather one. I got this at Dollar Tree as well, although I have a tip on that one. It's just a leather shoelace. And then I created 100 beads because in grade 1, they have to be able to go by skip counting by 5s. So here's my 5s, different colors, alternating. What you start with doesn't matter. But I have my 25s on here so that they can go and just grab it and they can just do some counting. And in some cases, they'll even move this and say, well, there's 5 and there's 10. And it doesn't move too well because I don't want it to move a ton. It wasn't designed that I want them to slide all over. But part of that is because the size of the leather shoelace. That's my tip to you. I'll use a white card in the background. Here's a new shoelace that I found. Again, let's see if I can get that to focus. And it's just again, it's not a leather, it's a plastic, but it's round and it's a little bit thinner. You can see off to the side here that it's not as thick as this one, and it works even faster. So when I'm sitting watching a television show or something, and I'm making one of these long strings, I will simply use a thinner one now, just because it's easier. It does mean they move around a little bit more, and just means you have to make sure you lace it at the end, because the ones that I have here on this lace, even if this comes undone, they're not sliding off of this. They're fixed. And that's the only reason I like using those when I'm doing demo ones. But if I was doing it when I wanted the kids to really have a little bit of movement in it, then I would use the smaller shoelace. Here's another one just to show you where I'm doing them in groups of 10s. So now they can skip count by 10s. And again, the color is insignificant. And maybe you want to make one where you're skip counting by 5s and you use 2 different sets of colors different than what you used in your Rekenreks when you made them with the students, and the same thing with the 10s. There's one teacher who did create them out of skip counting by 2 so that the students would have a visual by 2s. That took a little while for her, but obviously alternating the 2 colors every time and doing it that way. So there's an endless number here that you can have, but it just gives them a good idea of how that looks when you take your Rekenreks out and now put them end to end. So you had 10 rows that we've been working with. Now you see what it looks like when those 10 rows are put one end to the other. So I hope that gives you a good start to the Rekenreks and how you can use that for increasing your students' number sense and working with number facts. Those are important. Thanks very much, everyone.